I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting me wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
The third to last episode of The Bad Batch that's going to exist. I mean, this show is over in 2 weeks. And so we've got a lot to talk about with this episode. And then we're going to go all the way to a year before The Phantom Menace to bookend this era by talking about the Living Force novel by John Jackson Miller. It came out last week, and we are here to cover it, let you guys know what we think about this novel. And so we're super excited to dive into it. Between the Bad Batch characters, the Living Force characters, we've got a lot of character study to do, diving into what the prequel era is like at both time periods. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. But I am not alone in this endeavor because I am joined by my longtime co-host, the thoughtful thespian himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter, man, gosh, good to be here once again. I'm thinking back over the weeks, we're doing this. We've done every episode of the Bad Batch. We got 2 more left. It feels kind of like we're on a downhill slope, but it's a downhill slope to the end of 3 episodes of a TV show. I'm getting kind of sad about this whole thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sad about it also because we're really knocking on the door. Like we've said, we've got 2 episodes left, and we don't know what's going to happen, and it feels like they've got a lot to wrap up. But we do know everything's about to come to a head on Mount Tantus, on the planet Wayland. We know the Emperor's going to be involved. We know we've got a lot coming up fast.
Yeah, and I watched a video. Somebody cut out the last bits of the trailer that they did for this last little bit of the season of Bad Batch. And all that's left is seen from potentially the next episode. And it feels like there's a lot to cram in there. And because this episode, it didn't feel like there was much to it. I mean, but again, like with every episode, you got to peel back the layers and really do a deep dive on how this thing works. And we're going to do that.
Yeah, we are. We've got a lot to talk about, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we should just hop into it, because we've got such a packed episode to talk about today. And so the first subject is the Bad Batch episode number 13 for season 3, and it's called Into the Breach. And interesting name, they don't get to the breach, and so they didn't really go into the breach. So I thought that was a weird title choice. But anyway, we get the Bad Batch theme and then a very hard music cut right after the logo, very eerie sounding. And we know that we're in for it on this episode. We know that it's going to be dark. We know that it's going to be kind of sad. And we come in, contrasting with that really dark and eerie music, is a gorgeous daytime shot of Mount Tantus. Sunset or sunrise in the background, pink clouds, blue sky. It doesn't look like we normally see it. It doesn't look all ominous and dark and foreboding.
Yeah, once again, very good-looking stuff. I think this is why I'm getting sad about this, is because we don't get treats like this. You know, when it comes to a lot of the Star Wars stuff, especially when it comes to animation, it's either really old or it's in these custom animation styles. And so having this stuff just be really top-notch is I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, every scene being so meticulously put together and look so good has been something we've been spoiled for. But hopefully we're going to be able to see them take these skills and continue to build on them in the next Star Wars animated project. That we don't know what that is yet, but we know there will be one eventually. And so the show opens up with Omega in her cell in the vault with those other Force-sensitive kids. And so she is talking to those kids, kind of getting to know them just a little bit, and, asking them what they're doing, telling them, we're doing this game that they make us play, and they don't want us talking to each other. Just all 3 of these kids, all 3 of the grown kids that can speak are clearly very defeated. The baby is, obviously he doesn't know, he's a baby, and baby is a crazy term for this kid because he's being held. I don't think he can walk. That is a massive baby. That whatever species that is, that baby is huge. I pity the mother of that kid because that other kid is holding him like he's a kitchen trash can. That he's that big, that she's just bear hugging. When you look at that scene, it's 3 regular kids just standing with their arms to their side, and then this one kid bending her back backwards to try and keep this baby in the air. And the baby's obviously just has no idea what's going on. None of the kids are helping her, so this little Pantoran girl really stepped up. That Tarlafar is the name of that kid's species. So Tarlafar babies are massive. They're like little elephants. So
yeah, and the adult one wasn't big. So it's kind of hard to.
Yeah,
I guess they just come out big.
She's like a little wide,
very strange,
but kind of squat. I mean, she's dramatically shorter than a lot of other species, and so yeah, I think you're right. I think there's just not as much space between growth as it is for people. You come out as a baby Tarlafar, you're like 50% grown by the time you're out of your mother's womb. You're only going to grow funny. Another half of that.
That's a cool little species, but I feel really bad laughing in this situation because it's a baby in a prison.
Right.
How much more gross does it get?
Having to be taken care of by the prisoners, the other prisoner children. I mean, there's no indication that a doctor is taking care of this baby other than running experiments on it, which is not even, despite that being evil and wrong, just probably not a good idea. Like that Pantoran is also a kid. Like you want your specimen. I get the emotional, let's not talk to the specimens, yada, yada, don't want to build a bond. I don't get, let's not give them basic needs so that they are still good specimens. And that's when it seems that baby specifically is being neglected. And that Pantoran kid is just taking it upon herself to help him. But this sets up the not B plot, because both the plots are basically equal in this episode. This just sets up the first plot of Omega gaming out her escape. And so we then cut to another gorgeous shot, this time of a planet that is like Bespin, that is like Cloud City, but there's a bunch of them. It's a bunch of space stations or atmosphere stations suspended in this gas giant planet. And we see that the Batch is on one of those stations along with Admiral Rampart.
Let me interrupt just right fast. This is scientists and physicists theorize that in a certain layer of Venus that civilization could exist in a certain band in the atmosphere. So I'm willing to bet that this is what it would look like. Your Cloud City type habitats floating in a band of the atmosphere it could be not necessarily a gas giant. I mean, obviously that's one option, but also a Venus type planet. Very cool concept. That is, look into that. Go Google that if you're listening to this.
You're absolutely right.
Potential civilizations, and when we think of colonizing other planets as humans on Earth, Mars is the first thing that comes to mind. Well, I really think the moon should be, personally, but then Venus comes after Mars. It's a lot harder because you have to have a way to suspend these habitats in the atmosphere, which, it's already hard enough to get to Mars and survive the trip. Now you got to figure out how to float perpetually in an atmosphere. I don't know how that works.
See,
but here's a fun representation of it.
Titan is my advocate. I say we need to be going to Titan because of the water. But
that'd be fun.
Your supposition about the Venus thing, I think you're absolutely on the right track there. There's a really popular. This is for any of the board gamers who are listening to us. There's a really popular board game from like 2017, I think, maybe 16. But anyway, that time period, called Terraforming Mars, and it is an exceptionally well-received board game. I think it won the Spiel des Jahres, which is the board game award. But that game has also been credited as being really scientifically accurate. and their expansion, their first or second expansion, was Venus Next, and the whole premise is these suspended atmospheric space stations, and that you're populating awesome. Venus. It's a really fun game. I don't think you and I have played it. We really need to. If you do it with all the expansions, it's like an 8-hour game. But that's exactly what we need to do.
I'm down for that.
Is sit down, 10 a.m., eat some breakfast, and then roll through terraforming Mars.
Yeah, we already play 4-hour games on a regular basis.
What's 2 of them back to back?
Yeah.
So we see in this scene when we're on the spaceship, when the guys are talking to Admiral Rampart, that the boys are back in town. And when I say the boys are back in town, you would think that I mean Echo and Rex, but I really just mean Echo, because for some reason they are just not going to involve Rex in the last 3 episodes. And basically it seems like Rex is just going to be a hanging question mark for the rest of the show. Last we saw Rex, it was not, okay, I'm gone for an extended period of time, or I'm going undercover, or whatever. It was just a regular goodbye, but that appears to be our permanent goodbye.
Yeah, that's right. It seems to me like going to Tantus would be an extreme amount of peril, and Rex has to survive into the Rebels TV show, so he can't go here.
Well, and I think that is the indication that we're going to lose the team, is that nobody who survives is headed there. I think Omega's going to survive. I've said that all season long, because she's a kid, and they're not going to kill a kid off in an animated show. But I think it's fair game to kill the rest of the team. But one of the things that we really thought, when season 1 of this show came out, was that we were going to get a bridge between the Clone Wars and Rebels, specifically for Rex and Wolf and Gregor. And now it seems like that's just not going to happen at all. And so we may still not get our explanation of why was Rex just hanging out, hunting Jupas, and not fighting the Empire for, 12, 13 years. Or I guess like 15, 16. But anyway, there's like, I don't think we're going to get that explanation, which is that's not what the show's about. That's not going to make this show terrible or anything. But it's something that I was really just thought was a foregone conclusion going into this show, that now seems like there's just no time, that's not even going to be possible.
That just means there's going to be another show, right?
Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah, we'll see. They'll have to explain it eventually, I hope. I hope that that's the case. So the guys have a plan. They talk to Rampart, how are we going to get to Tantus? Rampart explains that there's a space station above Coruscant. This is the one that we've mentioned that looks like the Lothal Dome. And you have to go to that space station. You have to receive codes from that space station just so you can enter them into your Navicomputer and get to your destination on Tantus. And so even admirals in the Imperial military are not allowed to have this information. It's only broadcast to their Navicomputer. And so this is what Rampart's explaining to the guys, and is telling them this is how you get to Tantus. Nobody knows how to get there, and that's an example of how super locked down Tantus is.
Yeah, and I wonder even, if you've read or listened to any of the High Republic novels, a lot of it talks about how the hyperspace lanes had to be discovered and mapped out and basically planned, and there was hyperspace prospectors, because a person would discover a lane and sell it for the use of it to certain entities, I guess. And so I wonder if this Tantus is a planet where nobody knows about this hyperspace lane except for the Empire, and I
think that's likely.
That's
likely.
That seems exactly plausible. So
it's
fun little
be,
detail there.
Tantus, just fair assumption, is in one of 3 locations. It's in the core, probably not. It's in the outer rim, probably so, or it's in the unknown regions, maybe.
Right.
But it's got to be in one of these unexplored areas of the galaxy. It's like if you look at a map of the United States and you see towns and distances. On the East Coast, they're like 5 and 10 minutes apart. And then the further west you get, the further and further towns get apart. And that's the same way the Star Wars galaxy works from the center out. It's like the core and the inner core and just further out, those planets are close together. They're extremely well mapped. People know where everything is. You can't hide a planet around the center of the galaxy unless you're in the very center, like where Tython is, where there's all these, galactic storms. There's a black hole in the middle of the galaxy. It's hard to get there. But if you're just in the general 2 or 3 sections of the galaxy that are around the middle, everybody knows where everything is. And there's no undiscovered parts of there. And so it's a lot like the eastern United States is, where that tree is, that this town leads to this town, yada, yada. And then the further west you get and the further out you get in the galaxy, the more wild it becomes and the less people know about what's between places. And it's a lot likelier that there is a planet that nobody has any idea about there. And it's a lot less likely someone's going to stumble on your secret Sith cult planet, whether that's deep in the unknown regions or just somewhere out in the outer rim where communication is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I've actually been through a town that is not on any maps. And so you kind of come around the corner and you're like, what? Why is this here? And you figure out it's not on a map for a reason. You don't want to be there.
Yeah, when you say town, did it have any business? Was it just houses, or was there any business there?
It was businesses like tire shop and.
Oh wow! Well, that's pretty. That's pretty impressive that it wasn't on a map. Then,
it was strange. I don't even know if I had a post office. I didn't go driving through there, but.
Yeah, that's like one of those liminal places, right? That's just like you're there, and they have all kinds of X-Files episodes about this, and you're in a random town. It's like you don't want to be there. You don't want to. Those people come out at night and they're cannibals or something.
Yeah. It was in eastern New Mexico, south of I-40. So
eastern New Mexico has places like that.
Very,
but a lot
crazy.
Of the western United States has places like that. I mean, Star Wars is a space western. And Mos Eisley's Cantina is obviously just a desert town in Arizona or New Mexico. Right. That is, Mos Eisley is just a lawless desert town before the U.S. government got there. Yep. And so the analogy holds up. It's the Star Wars galaxy is just a circular map of the country. But the point of this is that Tantus is well hidden, and Tantus has to have codes transmitted to your ship to get there. And so the guys can't just go to that place and get the codes. They've got to get the codes from a ship that is heading towards Tantus. And so they tell Rampart, you're coming with us. We're headed to go get these codes. Put on this uniform. You're going to pretend to be an Imperial officer. We're your security detail. A little bit of a hole in that plan, I think, is that nobody in the Empire wears the armor that the Bad Batch is wearing. Not just their customized yellow, blue, we're rebels armor. Like, even they're wearing their old Imperial armor. It still doesn't look like anything. You're still probably going to question it, except out of the fact that we see displayed in this episode, the fear just throughout the Imperial hierarchy makes people not question things. Because if you ask the wrong question about a guy dressed in black, you're probably going to die. So you should probably if you see someone in the Empire dressed in more than 50% black, just leave them alone. Just let them do whatever they're supposed to do there. You're going to live. The Empire may fall, but you're going to live. So just let that go by.
Yeah, it's like Director Krennic walking around with his Death Troopers. He's got something special going on. You don't want to mess with this guy.
Right. So when they present the plan to Rampart, they throw him the uniform he's got to wear, and he protests because it's a captain's uniform, and he was a vice admiral. And I thought that was really funny, that he just couldn't. This guy has been in Imperial prison, has been freed, has his chance at freedom, and is still just trying to be as an uppity Imperial officer. So we then go back to Tantus. We get to see the scientists kind of watching over the kids, Dr. Carr watching over the kids, and there's another scientist who's talking to him, and she's like, those kids shouldn't be talking to each other. We need to keep an eye on them, blah, blah, blah. Dr. Carr's like, what's wrong with you? And honestly, this lady sucks. She is just so rude. She is this woman got on my nerves from the second she was on screen because she is just griping the whole time. Well, she does suspect something's wrong, though, and she's right. So she ends up being a good Imperial, but she doesn't find the answer. after she's done looking at the kids, we get back to there and they're all talking to each other. And Omega explains, I found a way to get out of here. She has a little diagram of the setup. She explains to the kids, we're going to escape because they have to send our samples out of the facility. That's where we're going to go. And so she is really asserting herself as a leader. And you can tell it's the last 3 episodes because this is Omega's big, come together, all the skills she's learned, leader moment. She tells those kids, I've escaped before, I have training, and this is all to allow us to see her show off her leadership capabilities.
Right, very cool. All these little scenes, you get to see that giant baby again. It's really funny. And they don't believe her, and we just have the audience get to sit there and be like, man, I can't wait to see this go down. It's going to be cool. And she's a lot older than these kids. These are young kids, right around 10 or just over 10. Obviously, they got a baby to contend with. It's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're not a team. Those kids don't have training. Those kids were just abducted children. Those kids are a lot tougher than probably any kid in that situation is actually going to be.
So do you think they're going to have be force, because the baby moved something with the force when we first saw it. These kids with their M count, I wonder if they're going to have some sort of capability that just, is able to show out in this stressful situation or something. I'll be interested to see what that is.
That's a really good theory. I think you're right. I'm willing to bet that you're correct there, is that we're going to get some form of force sensitivity out of one of the kids, and then the finale will get a little bit out of Omega. But it's not, I don't think anything's going to be major that any of them do. It will be Luke moving his lightsaber on Hoth or less on what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, right. Like moving a box into somebody's going to shoot him or something.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It'll be they're scared and they raise their hands and something happens.
Right.
Like an emotional outburst of the Force. Not really they were trying to do it. Is a good assumption to make. I think you're absolutely right. So we cut back to the guys in the Bad Batch and their mission. And so they're on the ship. They're unloading. They're getting ready. The guys are walking with Rampart. Wrecker stays with the ship, which is probably good because he's not a regular-sized person. That's a dead giveaway when you have this massive Hulk-sized man walking around that something's probably not right. Well, one of the Imperial officers is like, what's your business here? And Rampart immediately flexes on him. This is confidential. How dare you? Yada, yada. And this guy cowers back. It was good for Rampart flexing on a low-ranking random officer. Certainly, I'm sure you noticed this. Massive renaissance for bearded Imperials in this episode.
Yes.
Rampart's walking around with a beard. This guy has a beard. I mean, what more could you want?
No, I mean, seriously, I've always thought, man, how do I get to be cosplay as an Imperial officer? For one, I'm probably too fat, literally. I'd look like this dumpy weirdo. And then
I think a lot of the Imperial officers are much more rotund than you are. I think that's a hallmark of a good Imperial officer.
Yeah, you're talking about like Moffs and stuff like that, right? The governors, this and that.
Yeah.
But like these little lieutenants and stuff, I guess I could take a run around the block a few times and still keep my beard, and I'd look like one of these guys.
Well, that was the Rebels' MO. Was the Rebels, specifically because of the age group it was targeted to, especially in the very beginning, was a little bit more comedic, and so they made all of the Imperial officers not just inept, but they were all like there was no fit Imperial officer in Rebels. You were either a large fat guy or you were a string bean, and that was it. Those were your two options as an Imperial officer: skin and bones or a beer belly.
Those two guys got their heads chopped off, right?
They did, yeah. But I'm not just talking about those two. I think it's every officer. But the ones that the duo, the guys who are like Tag and Bink, but not the skinny guy and the big guy, they did get their heads chopped off by an Inquisitor. I don't know if it was the Grand one.
It was,
or
I think. I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, because they're like begging, and it's definitely a double-bladed lightsaber because he cuts them off at the same time. So yes, they did.
Crazy.
The ones who you're thinking of. So Wrecker is basically, so the guys are infiltrating the station. They're moving through the station, getting to their destination. And then they get to a science room. They stun an Imperial officer who says, you can't be here. And then Echo's trying to, scomp link in and figure out what the navicomputer codes are. While he's doing that, an Imperial officer comes up to the ship, and Wrecker is sitting there playing a Nintendo DS. Now, it may not literally be a Nintendo DS, but he is holding it like a video game, moving his shoulders like a kid playing a video game. That guy walks up and is like, "What are you doing?" And Wrecker immediately is like, "Oh, man, now I got to kill this guy." He doesn't kill him. He just knocks him out. But Wrecker immediately bop and then puts him on the ship, which is the only defense that Wrecker had. Of course he was going to knock this guy out.
Yeah. Wrecker's armor's cool. He looks almost like a space marine or something. He's so big.
Yeah, huge guy. So Echo finds out that the codes are transmitted to the ships after they've left the station. So there is no way to get the code transmitted, or there is no way to sneak onto a ship, rip the codes out of the navicomputer, and then leave, because the codes are on the ship's navicomputer as they are leaving. And so Echo has said he's going to sneak aboard the science vessel alone. And at first there's a little bit of pushback against this because, breaking up the team, yada, yada. Well, anyway, it makes a lot of sense because Wrecker is basically just a droid at this point. And I don't know if this has been explicitly stated, but I'm getting the feeling that Wrecker is, or that, I think I said Wrecker, I meant Echo. Echo is so much of a droid that he may not even come up on bioscans. Like, I think he really is. When Obi-Wan says that Vader is more machine now than man, I think Echo is literally that way, insofar as he's barely any man left.
Right, like a Borg from Star Trek or something.
Exactly. Like, he's got a human brain, but even that has been plugged into with a
augmented,
machine.
Yeah.
And so I really think that he is the only viable candidate. We don't know for sure if he doesn't come up on bioscans, but it seems that way.
Yeah,
it seems that way. So they decide that's their move, and then we cut back to Tantus with a awesome shot. It's done really well, painted really well, colored really well, whatever, just as we always say. But just the thought of doing a top-down shot of Mount Tantus with those two silver rings around it was really cool. And I don't know why I had never thought about that, but it looks really good. Like, I was like, wow, I love that shot, top down on the top of the mountain.
Yeah, very cool. Over the top cool almost.
Oh, wow. Anyway, so Omega is saying, I'm going to go to my room. I'm going to pop these panels where the droids do this thing. Well, anyway, she goes and she starts her little experiment, and then the mean lady scientist just starts to get suspicious and walks down there. The kids are all a little stressed out when she walks into the room. There's a lot of intense music. They make this really intense. And we as the audience, I feel like Omega is about to get caught. I was like, oh no, this is going to be really bad. But she doesn't. She's able to lodge all those panels off, figure out whatever she needed to figure out, and then put them back. And then she's just hanging out on her bed. And she's like, "What's up, Dr. So-and-so?" And she ignores her, obviously. But she doesn't find anything. And so when Omega comes back to talk to the kids, she confirms to them, we're getting out of here. We don't know how they're getting out. This hasn't been revealed to the audience. But Omega's confident that this escape is going to happen next episode.
Yeah, it's going to be like a feign, like where it looks like they've gone into the wall or something like that, but they're really somewhere else doing another thing. And it's a total misdirection thing. I can't wait to see how they pull it off. Very cool.
Yeah. Very, very cool. We then cut back to the guys, to the Bad Batch. And this is our little action at the end of the episode. So there's not a lot going on. Echo is sneaking around. There's all kinds of clone troopers, clone commandos, droids everywhere. They're loading on. They're being ID'd and checked to get on this ship to go to Tantus. But Echo finds the Jawa tube, the droid tube, that this ship has that sucks droids up in the vacuum. And so he's going to board the ship that way. So he does a bunch of cool acrobatics, yada, yada, and then he gets over there to go do it. And, man, when I'm watching this is something that is not always top of mind for me, but for some reason was very top of mind for me this episode, is how far we've come with Echo since the Clone Wars, since the Domino Squad episodes in the second season and on, and in the first season and on of the Clone Wars. We've spent a lot of time with Echo, and this dude started out as this just by the book, yada yada, quoting regulations guy, and now he's part of this unorthodox team. He's more droid, and he's just really become one of my favorite characters. We didn't get a lot of him this season, but we've spent a lot of time with Echo over the years, and for some reason, this episode really kept that top of mind for me.
Yeah, and this sequence really cements it home, if you ask me. I mean, it feels like some sort of video game, Metal Gear Solid or something, where you're sneaking from this spot to the next, and you got the camera views and all this stuff of where everybody's looking. And this one's even cooler because it's Star Wars, and you got KX droids walking around, and what are these? The specialist troopers, right? Gosh, it's a cool scene.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, all the clone commandos and everything else. It's a good little montage, or good little sequence, I mean. And so that ship, that science vessel launches, and the batch comes and does some cool aerial tricks, blah, 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 so they can magnetize to the hull after Echo's able to disable the sensor that would have, and boop, off to hyperspace. And that was a little bit of an abrupt ending for me, in a good way, because now we know the next 2 episodes, they're Tantus-centric. Like, it's it. These are 2 episodes, almost going to feel like a 2-parter, I'm sure, that are boom, boom, back to back, and we're going to get our wrap-up. And this has positioned us for our finale. The penultimate episode and the ultimate episode are next, and you can tell by the way this episode ends.
Yeah, the ending of this episode is pretty intense. You know, I mean, we knew what was going to happen, but they made it look like they barely made it to clamp onto this science vessel and zoom off into hyperspace.
Yeah, because it's like as
fun.
Soon as the clamp lock sound happens, the ship's gone. It's in hyperspace. Like, not a second too late. And I can't imagine what happens to a ship that is like only half clamped on into hyperspace. That ship gets torn to pieces. I guarantee it. It's just like ripped apart. I don't really know how hyperspace works, but I bet that's how it works.
Yeah. Very, very fun episode. Very cool sequences here.
Yeah, it was. It was a really good episode. It's so Bad Batch centric. It's so Omega centric, and this is the kind of stuff that we wanted to see. This is the good parts of the show, and I'm really happy that they gave us an episode like this for the third to last one, for the one right before the penultimate episode. I'm looking forward to these last 2, but I'm also, like you said, I'm getting bummed. We are at the end of the rope for the Bad Batch, and it's pretty surprising.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of fun things to figure out what happens to these characters. We hope they don't die, but not everybody's going to come out of this. You kind of know it to be true.
Yeah, that's just got to be the case. But instead of a group of people where 4 of them are probably not going to make it out, let's talk about a group of people where all 12 of them don't make it out alive. We're going to pivot now, and we're going to talk about The Living Force. So The Living Force is a novel, came out, like I said, last week, written by John Jackson Miller. We had a copy sent to us by our friends over at Random House Worlds for review, and we're super excited to talk about this story. And so, overview, the way this story has been promoted was pretty interesting. It is a story about the Jedi Council 1 year before the Phantom Menace, and the book is absolutely true to that tagline. I would not say there is a main character to this story. I would not say there is a main Jedi to this story. There are some that are featured a little bit more than others, but I wouldn't say the story is about any of them.
Right, and it's about every single one of them, and probably not who you'd expect. Like, I was thinking a lot more Qui-Gon Jinn was going to be in this. That's not true.
No, not at all. Qui-Gon is not in it very much. You're right. If you want to get a good Qui-Gon story, you need to go read Master and Apprentice. And honestly, reading Master and Apprentice right after reading this book would be really good. You'd get a lot. That book is Qui-Gon book. It should, as for all of the self-named Star Wars books we've gotten, all of the one name, the Phasma, the Tarkin, all of these books that are clearly character study books, Master and Apprentice is basically Qui-Gon's character study book. It really should just be called Jinn or Qui-Gon or whatever. So you really need to check that out for a Qui-Gon story. This is this book was really fun. Like I said, during the promotion, we got a lot of information. They did a map in the cover of this book. First time in a long time we've gotten a map of Star Wars. It's a map of the island. I felt of the islands of this planet Quinn. I felt myself referring to the map a few times, actually, to really get the layout of this planet, how these islands are connected, because you do a lot of island hopping, and each chapter it lists what island this story starts on. And so it was a really handy guide. I'm happy they included it. I hope they include more. And my big hope is on the High Republic book, we get a map of the Occlusion Zone. That is my huge dream, is to have a map of the Occlusion Zone.
Yeah, we need to see that and where it was and how it expanded to, for sure. Very cool.
Yeah. Yep, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, it would be cool. I'd love to see that expanse. And the mentioning of the High Republic here is, I think, really apt, because this book is not a High Republic book, but it's maybe the most tied in to the High Republic of anything released thus far that isn't set in the High Republic. Because there's just a lot going on in this book that's really referential to that time period and to those characters. And it makes sense. I mean, when this is happening, there are no other events that could really be referenced at this time. I mean, it's not like we're going to be able to reference any of the movies. None of them have happened yet.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It does feel like a capstone to those High Republic stuff, because it's been peace for so long, right? And all this drawdown, and then you wonder what Sidious has been doing in the background the whole time too. And we get there's a treat for anybody who likes that kind of stuff in this book as well.
There's a big treat for that. I thought it came out of nowhere too. I did not expect it. I did not expect that one.
Yeah, me either.
So the book itself opens with Qui-Gon Jinn quote from The Phantom Menace, and it's just, "Be mindful of the living force, young Padawan," which is really interesting. I'm glad they opened with it because of the challenge that we know that Qui-Gon's going to issue the council. But also it's pretty ironic because it is, "Be mindful of the living force, comma, young Padawan," when really the point of this book is how out of touch the council has become with the living force.
Yeah. So who's the Padawan? Anakin?
Well,
Obi-Wan?
It's Obi-Wan. Yeah, when he makes that quote, it's to Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
that quote is from The Phantom Menace. It's used at the beginning of this book to frame the fact that that's a message that Qui-Gon is repeating to Obi-Wan as his Padawan, but this is a message that has been lost on the Jedi Order as a whole during this time period.
Right. Yeah, and that's basically the whole point of the book, right? Is exploring the concept, and basically, hopefully they can recenter around that by going to Quinn, but I guess we know what happens after that.
Right. So we open the book up with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan aboard a liner called the Regal Zephyr. They have just been shutting down another Jedi outpost, and that's the crux of the whole issue, the crux of the issue of the book is that the Jedi themselves as an organization have become so disconnected with the rest of the galaxy because they have slowly taken the golden age of the High Republic, where Starlight Beacon exists and there's all these outposts across the galaxy, and Jedi are really active and they're helping individuals and just being peacekeepers and just generally going around and doing good. To over time, they become, tools of the Senate. They become tools of the Republic. They become a lot more insular. They focused a lot more on the cosmic force. And so Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are coming back from shutting down a Jedi outpost. And that is a point of consternation for all of the other passengers on the passenger liner that they're booked on.
Yeah, and so the Jedi moving out is a gigantic symbol that basically economic collapse of that wherever that planet is. And so many of these concepts are explored throughout the rest of the book.
Right. And I mean, these are real world concepts. So the Jedi don't pull away because of some lack of funding. Like, it's not like the Jedi lost out on money, but they do pull away because there's less people in this location, and these are their justifications, is that, the Jedi can't be everywhere, or this outpost has gone unused for so long, and so it needs to be shut down. And so, but this happens in the real world. I mean, you look at places, you look at the Rust Belt in the United States, and you have towns that were thriving and booming in the 60s and the 70s, and then the economy got worse in the 70s in these places, and business started to move out. Business started to relocate to other countries, and you slowly see a deterioration of these areas. As people move away, there's less of a tax base, and so then the police force is not as well funded. And there's just continues to be this self-feeding cycle where you have less people, you have less taxes, so now there's more crime. More crime leads to less people, which leads to less taxes, which leads to more crime. And so it's a real-world concept that we're seeing played out in the parts of the Star Wars galaxy that we were talking about in the Bad Batch portion that are the Wild West of the galaxy, that are the less supported areas of the galaxy in general. Alderaan doesn't have factories. Alderaan doesn't make things. They're not a manufacturing planet. They are near the core, and they're this monarchic society that is all about art and leisure, and no one has to want or work on Alderaan. And that's just not the case for 99.8% of the planets in the galaxy. 99.8% of the planets in the galaxy operate either at our baseline of how we live our lives or worse. Like, we are some of just anybody who lives in a Western country in the world is better off than most people in the Star Wars galaxy. Even people who don't have anything generally bad ever happen to them. It's just, in general, your quality of life is way lower in the Star Wars galaxy.
Right. I mean, there's just too many people. And that's just the biggest trope of this book and a lot of this other stuff is, the gangs can just run rampant almost, and there's not enough peacekeepers to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we get introduced to some of these gangs in the first chapter. And I hate to open up our review, because I liked this book quite a bit, but I hate to open up our review with a negative. I did not like the name for pretty much any of the gangs. I understand that they are not the Hutt Cartel and they're not the Pike Syndicate, that these are the gangs that we're going to be talking about in this episode are not those guys. They are not galaxy-spanning criminal enterprises. They're not the Mafia. They're not the Yakuza. These guys are like your neighborhood gangs, or a little bit better than that, but they're just a little connected. Like, they're not the cream of the crop as far as crime goes. But the names are like the Vile and the Staved Skulls. Yeah. The only name I think that I really liked was the Filthy Creds. The Filthy Creds was a really good name, and then the others I was like, these aren't that great.
And the Riftwalkers was the other one, not featured in this first chapter, but later on.
Yes, and there's one other as well, because there's 5 total, but I don't remember what the other one was called. It'll definitely come to us as we're going through this book. So other than setting the tone for the state of the galaxy and for the year before the Phantom Menace, I mean, we as readers know that this is precipitating the collapse. I mean, we're on the cusp of the galactic collapse. And so the other important thing that we get to see in the first chapter is how Jedi are supposed to be. This goes back to what a lot of people always say. This goes back to one of our How the Force Works questions from a few months ago on who is the ideal Jedi, who's the perfect Jedi. And the two answers are always either Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan, and there's 2 schools of thought there. But the important part of this is that we see them being the ideal Jedi. We see them in this first chapter on the ground doing work for average people and disarming conflicts without a shot being fired. I mean, the fact that they are peacekeepers on this ship, you would think is going to mystify these passengers forever. That they were the beneficiaries of some random Jedi safety that on any other given day was not going to happen. That they were going to get all of their valuables stolen by the 3 idiots that we see in this chapter.
Yeah, it's just a foregone conclusion that, hijacked. I guess this is a Tuesday.
Yeah. Especially in this part of the galaxy, from what we see. I mean, as these outposts are closing down, this becomes a more and more regular occurrence. all the way down to 33 years later, where Mos Eisley is this wretched hive of scum and villainy that the Empire can't even keep under control criminally. And so the book continues, and the talk about the Jedi closing down the temple on Tharbin, I think is the name of the planet, has led these passengers to be extremely jaded and to have a terrible outlook on the Jedi Order, so much so that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon save their valuables. They get Lobber and Wungo and the other guy into the hold, and nobody's there to thank them. They're all there to just gripe them out, and that's what they do. That's at the end of chapter 2 is Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon sitting down to get bitched at for the rest of this trip.
Yeah, and it's sad to see. It really is.
It is. It is sad to see. There's a lot of talk about Jedi outposts in this book, and I want to tell anybody who wants to know what a Jedi outpost is like. There's a 3-part manga written during the High Republic era called The Edge of Balance, and these show how Jedi outposts are a force for good in a community, how much they can mean and do for a community, and it's an important thing for people to see and read on how how long down of a spiral it's been from the time of the High Republic to the time of the Phantom Menace. And my hope is that the Acolyte will really help bridge the gap here. Like, I don't want the Acolyte, which is 100 years or is 70 years before this story, to just be the galaxy like it is during the prequels. Like, I want it to be that middle ground between this high galactic renaissance and this bureaucratic swamp that we find ourselves in the prequels. Like, I want there to be a gap bridged there.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be really fun to see. I hope that's what we get.
Yep. So chapter 2 gives us, Qui-Gon really gives us the point of the book. The living force is being neglected by the council. The council is too invested into the cosmic force. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan get back to Coruscant, and then for the next few chapters, we get a run of all of the Jedi Council. We get interactions between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan with nearly all of them. And it's just, these are really so we can understand these characters. It's so we can, especially the lesser known ones. We get Plo Koon, we get Ki-Adi-Mundi, we get Evan Peel in the Clone Wars. So we're more familiar with their characters. But Oppo Rancisis and Yarl Poof, they're dead before the Clone Wars starts. And so we don't, and Yaddle, we don't really know much about their characters. And so this is our first chance to really get a look at a lot of these Jedi counselors, especially in canon. We already didn't have much to look at in the expanded universe for some of these counselors. Before this book came out, we essentially had nothing about a lot of them.
Yeah, and it really was. The ones who weren't around, it was fun to, I really liked how Poof acted throughout the whole book. He was so old, and
dude,
like one chapter talks about how he's like, how he responds in different eras to different people. It's so funny.
Have you seen the Robot Chicken episode, Star Wars Special Episode 3, Yarl Poof skits?
No.
Oh,
or
my
if I have,
gosh.
If I have, it's been an immensely long time, and I don't remember it.
Got to go to YouTube. They have a playlist. They're like, all total, it's probably 15 minutes. And it's all of these. It's Yarl Poof during Order 66, which in canon, he's dead before then. But that was like the only information we ever had about Yarl Poof, was this complete satire of him. And basically Yarl Poof goes and gets pizza for everybody during Order 66, and he comes back and everything's dead and destroyed. Well, he's like the punching bag for the Jedi Council as far as Robot Chicken is concerned. Like, they're always making him go pick up the pizza and stuff like that. And so then it's about Yarl Poof surviving through the Imperial era. It is very funny. But I think that Yarl Poof has so little character development in actual Star Wars expanded universe and canon that John Jackson Miller took that Robot Chicken portrayal and ran with it, because Yaropoof is very similar to his Robot Chicken portrayal in this book, and I loved it. I was all over it. I was very happy about it.
Yeah, I have some vague memories of those episodes, but man, I do have to go watch them again.
You do, yeah. I mean, like I said, they have a YouTube playlist of just those scenes. They're worth seeing. They're absolutely worth seeing. There's a really good interaction between him and Palpatine, but I won't spoil it for you any further. Speaking of Palpatine, one of the Jedi interactions that we get to follow is Adigala and Yoda in the Chancellor's office, talking to Chancellor Valorum, but Palpatine is also there, about just general stuff, just how much work. This scene right here really shows us how much the Senate is just piling busy work onto the Jedi. We get a line, Palpatine always had a suggestion for every problem in the book. And I think Adigala thinks that to herself. And that's Palpatine to a T, right? Because he creates the problems to then solve them, to further his gains.
Right.
So this was what I wanted to see. He is further in the suggestion he makes that she's thinking about this is they can't tell in the moment, but we as readers can tell that what he's hoping comes of this suggestion is to further paint the Jedi as enemies of the people, to continue to make the people distrust the Jedi Order.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, throughout every chapter almost, all this bad stuff that happens, you can almost turn it back to Palpatine and all his... Like why stuff is closing in anyway. All the cartels taking over, the business is pulling out. I mean, there's nothing that expressly says this in the book, but you kind of know with how the Sith work that it's all Palpatine's machinations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So one of the final parts of this scene is that the Jedi are being set up for brand deals, basically. There's like a new Republic planet that makes shoes and donated a bunch to the Jedi Order, wanting the Jedi to wear them. And the Senate's trying to assert that they do this, or the Chancellor is. And there's a lot in this chapter about Adigala's he asks these, speaking about Chancellor Valorum, he asks these questions, just to say he asked. Like, he doesn't care at all about the result. He just wants to be able to say that he said it, that I asked. He doesn't want to be a liar. And so he doesn't care if they wear the shoes or not. And there's also a really funny line where Yoda says, "But I've never worn shoes." Really funny, but one of many, many instances in this book where Yoda is not written with his correct syntax. There are a lot of times that Yoda speaks in this book that are not backwards. And I was really curious and concerned about that. I don't know how that could get past editorial when you're writing such a when you're writing any Star Wars book, but specifically a Yoda-focused book where he's the Grand Master of the Council. I feel like that's something that's not going to slip through the editing cracks, but it did more than once, like a few times that I noticed.
Right. And then, I mean, there's a big pivotal moment in the book that has to do with this, which we'll get into, but this kind of buttresses isn't there a fan theory? You know more than me on this, that Yoda does that just to mess with people?
Yeah, there is. Well, there's the point, or not the point, but I don't think I can't remember if this is canon, or it's tenuously canon, or if it's expanded universe. So what I'm about to say is, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know if this is sourced right or not, but that Yoda's actual justification for why he speaks that way is so people will pay attention to what he is saying more. Because of his stature, he's like, if I say things weird or backwards, people will think about what I'm saying more because they're having to process it differently, which is probably honestly true. Very smart strategy if that's the case. I just can't remember if that's actually what it is or not.
Well, combine it with being 800 some odd years old and with all the wisdom that entails.
Right.
There might be something to that, It
makes him sound wiser, obviously, and it makes him more mysterious. It builds the mystery around his species. Not that he wants to come off as mysterious, but I think a huge key to Yoda's mystique from the very beginning, from The Empire Strikes Back, was when they decided to make him talk backwards. And I can't remember if that is a George Lucas invention or a Frank Oz invention. But
yeah.
Regardless, one of the two invented it, and it is, I think, why the character has become so long-lasting and endearing.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's it's part of the zeitgeist of society. You know, somebody, if you were to point to a random person and say, "Hey, act silly," they're going to quote Yoda like straight off the gate.
Mm-hmm,
you know, and I mean that came out in the it was in the early '80s,
right?
Late '70s, early '80s, all that stuff. So, it's crazy how much of that has penetrated culture, and it will probably last for hundreds of years. You know, as long as people like Star Wars.
Yep, I think you're right. So Jarl Poof, we get. I just want to talk about him for a second. You didn't jump the gun when you mentioned him, but I have him in my notes for Chapter 7 because he is so funny. The dude is hilarious in this story. Like you said, he and Ki-Adi-Mundi are sitting there training some younglings, and he says he mind tricks, in quotes, because he doesn't actually, the younglings to block his path because Ki-Adi-Mundi is asking them, what do you do when someone bigger than you is trying to hurt you? And the kids walk up and they get in front of him. And it's revealed that he didn't mind trick them, that the kids actually just love Poof. And then Ki-Adi-Mundi is sitting there thinking about it, and it's younglings love the guy. Yet another group of younglings have chosen Jarl Poof as their mascot, is what Ki-Adi-Mundi says. And so it's just a really cool part that continues to endure Jarl Poof to me. I think that he is my favorite character to come out of this book.
Yeah, me too, actually. You stole my thunder a little bit there. But I'm just kind of, in a silly way, envious of these kids. Wouldn't it be just enthralling to sit there and pick somebody's brain who's several hundred years old?
Right,
you know,
right.
They probably wouldn't let you do that because why would they? They're several hundred years old, and you're an aunt to them almost. Not literally. I'm sure they'd get, but it'd be annoying to have somebody come up here and pester you with questions. Like, man, I've answered this. They'd have pull out a little notebook and check all the questions that they've answered that many times or something. But still, I would love to have that opportunity alone. Be like, man, what was it like when this happened? I mean, we already do that in a sense. I asked my grandparents, what was it like when World War II ended? How was the energy and all this stuff? But still, go back to something like, man, what was it like when the Romans were expanding or something like that?
Right.
It'd be insane.
And Star Wars always has a more, I don't know about interesting, but a completely divergent take for long-lived beings like Jarl Poof and Yoda and Chewbacca than the standard Lord of the Rings take, which, you know, the elves are around for thousands of years, and so they've become so aloof and they're so uncaring and yada yada because everything that they've seen hundreds of human generations pass. And despite that being the case for the characters in Star Wars, they don't lose their humanity at any point. They may be a little weird or more wizened than others, but they're all very human. And Jarl Poof is a big example of that. And honestly, in Star Wars, it seems the longer you live, the more human you become, the more humanity
you're exactly
you
right.
have. And so it's a very interesting opposite side of that Lord of the Rings coin. So we continue through the story. I put a little note for Chapter 7 that we got some more info about Depa Billaba, and I said I'm really excited for there to be a little bit of story around Depa Billaba because of Kanan being her Padawan, and so it's going to be cool to get to learn a little bit about her. When I wrote that down, I had no idea how much Depa Billaba we were going to get in the book.
Right.
I mean, I don't really feel like there's a main character. If there were a main character, it's probably Depa Billaba. But we continue. We finally get to the Jedi meeting together in the Jedi Council. And so the over these last couple chapters, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have been trying to get a quorum of the Jedi Council together so they can talk about their experiences on that Royal Zephyr line coming back from Tharbin. And so they want to basically it's for Qui-Gon to level the challenge that we know is coming. Because that's how the book was promoted, was this is Qui-Gon's going to be challenging the council. Adi Gala has a crazy line in this scene. She says, just boom, this is the whole sentence, we serve the Senate. Super tone-deaf thing to say in the Jedi Council room. I don't care who you are. I know that Adi Gala is the one that spends all the time with the senators and yada yada. Crazy thing to say. And the book says, you know, that makes a lot of masters shift in their seats or whatever. I can't even, after we've gotten to know all of the masters really well, I can't think of any of them but Adi Gala that thought that was an acceptable thing to say. So that threw me a little bit. And when I got that, I thought maybe we're going to get a story about more hardline Jedi versus more free-flowing Jedi, cosmic force versus living force kind of thing. You know, Jedi who think they are agents of the Republic and Jedi who think they're more independent. But in a couple subsequent chapters, Peel says that, and Master Evan Peel says that in councils with these kinds of divides, with factions, are always really inept. And that this council is a bunch of masters on a spectrum of beliefs. And that absolutely rings true the further you get into the book. All of these characters are very distinct.
Yeah, very distinct. And as it progresses, their stories just get better and better. And I can't wait to get into talking about the different aspects.
Yep, I agree. So we learn about the events of Quinn. We learn about the planet Quinn. Qui-Gon levels his challenge to the council. You know, get out there, go into the galaxy, be a part of the living force, help one person is what he says. That's his actual challenge, is help one person. And so the candidate for that is the next Jedi outpost that is scheduled to be shut down on Quinn. And so all of the Jedi are going to travel to Quinn before the shutdown. They're going to hold this ceremony for the 200th anniversary of what's called the Grand Renewal. And in the book, the Grand Renewal is an event during the High Republic era where Quinn is basically taken from out of the muck and elevated as this gorgeous tourist paradise planet that is just of the achievements of the High Republic, it's just another feather in the cap. It's just another one of the great things that happened during the High Republic time period.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think we have gotten this published yet. What happens on Quinn during that era or any other THR tie-in, but I'm certain we will get one now. With this coming out, it'll be at least an issue of a comic book, at the very least.
Right.
And so we also get to see Oppo Rancisis, who was alive during that. He was the main driving force behind Quinn's renewal, we learn. And so through his descriptions, we get to learn about Quinn, and we get to learn about the Grand Renewal, and we get to see how great the Republic was. If this is the first Star Wars book you've ever picked up, and you're not familiar with the High Republic, this chapter in Oppo Rancisis do a really good job of kind of pitching to you what the High Republic is, and it is the Jedi and the Republic do great things. That is the point of the era, is that they overcome great adversity and they do really stupendous things that are just not even present in the prequel time period. Like the Jedi Order is so exceptionally different than it was during the High Republic era.
Yeah, it really is, and this is just a peek into that. And you have to read those High Republic books to see what they were doing at the start of it. Anyway, very cool.
Yeah. So we learned that on this planet Quinn, there is a Jedi outpost with a Jedi library. That as people have traveled there, they've left tomes. One of the things mentioned was written by Avar Kriss, so another small High Republic tie-in. And every time there was a High Republic tie-in, I was really happy. I just thought it was really great.
Yeah, it really was.
So then we start to get the first of the Jedi Masters to arrive on the planet. And this is maybe the funniest thing that happens in this book. And it's just a line, and it made me laugh out loud. And I don't often laugh out loud when I'm reading a book, but this one definitely got me. And it's talking about Jedi Master Evan Peel. Same height as Yoda, basically pink Yoda, because he's got the big ears and he's the same height. He's got the one eye. He's this real gruff and rough character. He speaks unlike anybody else. I mean, he uses the word ain't. He's very colloquial. Anyways, he says he's built like a hover tank, but he's 1 meter tall. And this, for some reason, just killed me. Because really, when you look at pictures of the I don't know if he was a puppet or if he was a person in costume, but you look at the pictures of the character in the prequels and from the Clone Wars, he really is. I'd never noticed how stout this guy is. He's like a little dwarf. I mean, he's a brick house. It's super funny.
Yeah. He's a cool little character.
He is. He's cool. He's cool. So he finds that there's just all these kids running wild on this island. I mean, it's like the Lord of the Flies on one of these islands. It's the school island, and it's just like there's graffiti everywhere. There's packs of children running around, and so he starts distributing food to the kids because he understands they're hungry. And these are Jedi counselors, and so this whole book is not going to be, all 12 of them are so out of touch with the galaxy. And it's not the whole book is not just meant to lambast the Jedi Council. I mean, these are amazing. They're the 12 best Jedi that exist. And so they know how to be good Jedi, despite Qui-Gon's accusations. They've just forgotten because they've been sequestered on Coruscant. They've become so aloof. And so Peel starts distributing food to these kids, and then he starts teaching them. He's their school has been shut down because in the Star Wars universe, school is corporate. There's no public education system. It's whatever corporation is around funds the school system. That happened in the United States and in other parts of the world for a really long time. And so that's what we see here. And so what the economy's going bad, so whatever corporation runs this school shut it down, and so now Peel is doing some ad hoc educating. And
it's really cool how he pulled all the stuff together. And this sets the tone for what the rest of the Jedi do on this planet. And it's not just like we're going to show up and have some ceremony and leave. We're here to make an impact. And you can tell Qui-Gon's words just from this one part has affected these guys. Very cool.
Yes, it absolutely has. It is cool. And like you said, it sets the tone for the rest of the story. So my notes on chapter 14, I guess I blacked out when I was writing this because the only word is Veers in all caps, because we're on this ship called the Assurance, which is, there's no Republic Navy, but he's like contracted to work for the Republic, yada yada. Mace Windu is on this ship. They're working with Depa Billaba, who is on a mission on a nearby planet, and she is infiltrating a criminal syndicate. That one was the Rift Walkers. Anyways, I got all of that information in chapter 14, but I didn't write any of it down because General Veers, the guy who is in charge of the ground assault on Hoth, is on this ship as a teenager, and he is this incompetent communications officer, and I loved every second of it. Every time he got mentioned, I was just so happy. I thought it was hilarious that they were like, yep, that guy, we're pulling him back. 33 BBY, this is what he was doing. And it was really, really funny.
The rest of the chapter is Mace Windu. He's waiting for Depa Billaba to make contact.
Right. And the reason that Veers is included in this, and I'm confident to say this is the reason, is, and we've mentioned this before on this podcast, there's a Twitter account that if you have Twitter and you're a Star Wars fan, it's basically mandatory that you follow this account. And that account is called Veers Watch. And it's ran by a guy who the only thing he does is tweets out whether or not Star Wars releases had General Veers in them. And he does them for anything. The High Republic that releases 200 years before Veers possibly could have been alive, every single issue of anything, it's no Veers. But he definitely checks it no matter what. And so the editors and the folks at Random House Worlds are involved on Star Wars Twitter. They know who this guy is, and they saw their opportunity and took it. And so
that's awesome.
He tweeted about it at John Jackson Miller, and John Jackson Miller was like, well, everybody else in the galaxy's in the story, so why wouldn't I put Veers in it? And he's right. It was super good. I just really, really enjoyed it. It's a funny entry. It's a funny entry.
Hilarious.
Yeah, it was good. And good for that Veers Watch guy for getting, before that Twitter account existed, we were never going to get Veers in a story set during this time period. That wasn't going to happen. Right. So good for that guy for making an actual difference in Star Wars publishing. Very impressive. Very impressive. So we go and we then get a really deep look at the Riftwalkers crime syndicate. And these are our bad guys. we've had a couple scenes with her already, Zalastra, the leader of this, but this chapter endeared me to her when she gives a sabacc analogy for the 5 crime syndicates. She does this long explanation about how there are 5 major syndicates in the galaxy, including the Hutt Cartel and the Pikes and the Black Sun and everybody else, and how, these 5 entities keep each other in balance. And it's not really, I don't think that's real. I don't think what she's saying is true in the real world, but it's a compelling enough explanation for Star Wars insofar as, 4 gangs, you've always just basically got 2 on 2 until they merge together and it's 1 versus 1. 3 of them, it's always going to be 2 versus 1. The weaker one's going to gang up. But 5 keeps everybody guessing and it flowing, and there's no massive team-ups between these gangs or whatever. So it was compelling enough for me to start to really get endeared to this Zalastra character. And I liked her a lot. She was a good foil.
Yeah, I thought this was just the gangs in the slice, not necessarily the galaxy as a whole.
No, she makes the analogy first for the gangs as a galaxy as a whole, justifying why the same would ring true for the smaller gangs in the slice.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. She's just, I think she gives another example of not criminal syndicates, but another thing that is 5. But yeah, she's just basically saying that's the number for stability. So we then keep going. We get Eth Koth's adventure on the planet. Eth Koth is the Zabrak Jedi. He is basically an accountant, I guess. Not really an accountant, but he does a lot of data entry and manual work for the Jedi Order, which is, if you're on the Jedi Council, why are you doing that? There's no way that this guy is the one who needs to be doing that. The same as in one of the earliest chapters, we see Yaddle doing legal work for the Jedi Council. And it's there's these kinds of tasks could absolutely be given to a knight or another master that's just not on the council. I would think if you're on the council, you might get a little more privileges of, you don't have to do this very technical work.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like they all got their cabinet positions in a corporation almost. This one's the HR director. This one's the chief financial officer. This one's
it's very akin to that. We get a lot of the inner workings of the Jedi Order in this, and not in the way you would think. Not in the this is how the Order's structured, but a lot of this is how the Order deals with legal disputes. And that is our justification with Yaddle, is she says she's so old that she's seen precedent for everything, and that they don't need to go and try to find precedent because she knows it. And so Eth Koth, his whole thing is he's trying to catalog the books in the outpost that's going to be shuttered, but he can't find them. And so he talks to Seneschal Vo, the non-Jedi who works for the Order, who keeps this outpost. He lights the brazier every night for this outpost. And so there's a brazier for this outpost that's a giant shining beacon. It represents the light of the Jedi Order. Anyways, Eth Koth is supposed to catalog the library, and he learns that some books are missing. And this was really interesting to me because I was like, oh yeah, this is going to really matter. This is going to super come into play later in the story. And it does, just absolutely not in any way that you would think.
Yeah.
But Eth Koth goes down to this bookstore, finds this quirky little lady running it, and he starts to look through these books, and he ropes Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan to come to Quinn and help him search through this house, which is really funny. And just, basically Qui-Gon's getting his medicine for making the council come here in the first place. And so we are then taken back to the Riftwalkers, and we get a description of their base. We get what's going on there. Balaba has been infiltrating this organization by working with a 12-year-old named Kyla, who is she's the fits in tiny places one. I mean, it's the Guardians of the Galaxy excuse for Peter Quill. It's, you're a little kid, so you can get to places I can't get. Anyways, Balaba has befriended this kid under false pretenses so she can infiltrate this gang. We get to see the pirate base described as all of these ships smashed together. Very neat aesthetic for a pirate base. But we get to, early on, understand that this Kyla girl has been stealing cases from the Regal Zephyr Voyager line from the first chapter, and that these cases are locked. They can only be unlocked with a passcode word, yada yada. Well, anyways, these cases have been being sent to the other 4 gangs under the false pretense that the Regal Zephyr line has bribed all 5 gangs to not attack their shipments. And so this was all a setup by Zalastra. This is pretty complicated in a good way. Like, I was pretty impressed with the whole scheme. But anyway, this was set up by Zalastra as a false pretense. Regal Zephyr never contacted any of the gangs. She had endeared herself, made all these people trust her, and then she put a bomb in 4 suitcases and blew up 4 crime syndicate headquarters. And the way that these explosions are described is like, it took out 5 city blocks and it destroyed a space station. Like, it is massacre on a huge scale.
Right. Even some of the Jedi, Yoda remarks that he felt a disturbance in the Force on some level.
Yeah, because there are thousands of people just died. It is really, really nuts that was how they kind of communicated that. But it was good. It was compelling, and it sets Zalastra up as a pretty fiendish villain. And this is also where Balaba reveals herself as a Jedi, inadvertently. She opens the case, strikes her lightsaber on, but Zalastra is able to disable her by threatening Kyla's life. Surefire way to get good guys to not hurt you is to threaten to hurt some innocent person.
Right, especially Jedi.
Yeah.
You know, that's always going to be, and I don't know, Jedi have faith in the Force. There's going to be a way out of it otherwise.
Right.
Or give up their life. I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so she arrests. She detains Balaba, puts her in jail, and is going to kill her. And this progresses throughout the rest of the book, because then we get like 4 chapters that are all kind of weird back to back. That are like, this is how the Jedi catered to the event, and this is how the Jedi. And at the end, they all come together. But when you're reading these chapters, you're like, what are we talking about? Like, there is a whole chapter about how they got the event catered. And it is just kind of out of nowhere. You're like, what in the world are we doing for these 4 chapters? But it all comes together. So we then get Yaddle. She goes to a TV station. And it's I'm gonna miss the species name. I don't remember what it is. But the same announcers from the Phantom Menace who announced the pod race, the guy with 2 heads, one with red and one green, same species. These guys bicker. It's a pretty funny gag. But anyway, Yaddle gets on the news, the HoloNet news, and she's telling everyone about this event. And I just think, I wrote down, it's so surreal seeing Yaddle in this book, reading about Yaddle, because we know in less than a year's time that Count Dooku's going to kill her. And so before that Tales of the Jedi episode came out, I didn't really care about Yaddle. Like, there's a few Jedi Masters in this that they're cool. I'm happy I got to learn about them. But like Saucy Tin, Adigala, Eth Koth, like they could be anybody. They're just background aliens is what they are. And so getting to see into their lives, but mainly getting to see into Yaddle's life, super cool, because just the more we've learned about her, that one Tales of the Jedi episode really endeared her to me.
Yeah, they're all really good. Seeing all this stuff happen, like, it just humanizes stuff so much. And I understand these are all alien species and stuff, but like, before this book, they're just like goofballs taking up seats in a council room,
Yeah, they're just weird-looking prosthetics. I mean, they're just puppets, which is cool. Yeah. That's a big part of Star Wars, but they're just puppets.
Yeah, and now they're out on this planet doing all kinds of cool stuff, infiltrating gangs, planning events, saving victims of gang attacks, stuff like that. So cool.
Yeah, it is, because and one of the coolest parts is that John Jackson Miller is able to give us 12 distinct characters. He's able to say these people are all very different, and I wouldn't say that any of them are too similar. Now, some are closer to each other than others are, but none of them are like copy-paste. Like, oh, we've got another Yoda right here, or oh, Saucy Tin is actually also just Plo Koon. They're the same person. Everyone is very distinct, which I was happy that was the case.
Yep.
So the next chapter, we get a trope that I'm tired of. And I'm only tired of it because you and I have read about this trope basically back to back to back. But the reason that Zalastra is a criminal and hates Jedi is, ding, 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 one time a Jedi came and found her and some friends, and she's not Force sensitive, so the Jedi didn't take her, and now she's mad about it. And guess what? That's the reason that the whole Phase 2 of the High Republic's villain is motivated. And that's also the reason that, what was that? What character was motivated that way recently? It was an expanded universe book that we read. It must have been the Thrawn trilogy, but I'm trying to remember who that was. No, it was Outbound Flight. The janitor in Outbound Flight. That guy.
That's right.
Same thing.
Yeah.
And he's not the main antagonist, but it's just like, how many people are going to hold a grudge against the Jedi for not getting picked when they were 2 years old? Like, it wasn't, I don't know. I get that it's an easy way to make someone dislike the Jedi, but that's probably why you shouldn't use it that often, because it's a really easy way to say, they hate the Jedi because of this. Like, why can't it be, a much more plausible, or not more plausible, because that's plausible, but just a different tact. Like, I hate the Jedi because one time a Jedi came to my town and then deflected a blaster bolt and it hit through our window and killed my mom. Like, that's at least more creative.
We need to see if the authors of these books are middle children and families.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good one, because that's basically what this is. This is middle child syndrome. That's a really good way of putting that. That's a really good way of putting that. So yeah, it's just that part is like, I don't know why. I don't know why that's there.
Yeah, I mean, they need to do some more effort on bad guys. She was a good bad guy for sure, but
it was just the hating Jedi motivation, and she doesn't even have to hate Jedi. Is the other thing? Why can't she just be a criminal who wants to be a criminal and I want to be this big bad gang boss? No one's going to stand in my way, including space cops. Like,
I mean, even in real life, but especially more so in Star Wars, successful criminals are hyper rich, hyper live in these luxurious spots. They work really hard, just as any other very well-to-do off person for the most part. Just being a criminal in the context of Star Wars isn't necessarily like, I won't say it's not a bad thing. It obviously is, but like, it's a legitimate career path.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is that we talk about this all the time. Star Wars is black and white, good versus evil. That's what the stories are about. And so not every bad guy has to be misunderstood. Not every bad guy has to have a motivation for what they're doing. That's not just, I'm bad and I want to do this. And they don't have to just be, I'm evil for the sake of being evil. But you can be, I'm evil because I'm just selfish. I just want what's best for me.
Especially, it started out that way. She shot a pilot right off the bat. Just steals people's ships. In their livelihoods. I mean, she has no redeeming qualities in a sense, but it still has this thing of like being endearing because, I guess I'm wrong on that. She how many million she just killed a bunch of tens of thousands of people with her bombs.
Right.
So I don't know. She's a good villain in a sense of, just as any other well-written villain is. I mean, the trope is a trope, but it's like, still not written poorly or something
it's
like
just,
that.
You look back at the Star Wars villains, and when you look at Emperor Palpatine, that guy is just evil to be evil. He is just selfish, and that's totally fine and acceptable. Jabba the Hutt, there's no Jabba the Hutt backstory where it's like, I'm a little slug on Now Hutta, and I got bullied, and so now I'm a crime boss. No, he was born into it. The Hutts are criminals. The Hutts are gangsters.
That's a family business.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just a bad dude. It's just Jabba the Hutt, cares about himself. He's selfish. Not like he has the Force. It's a hard galaxy out there. And so he is just doing... he's not just doing what he does to survive, but he is just doing his thing. And that's okay. He's still a bad person. He doesn't need to have some reason that he's bad. He doesn't need to have a tortured childhood for us to feel bad for Jabba, or to be like, oh, that's why Jabba hates the Jedi. No, why does Jabba hates the Jedi like regular criminals hate police officers? It's not, a police officer came and did this to me one time when I was a kid. It's, I commit crimes, police officers stop crimes. I don't like police officers because I don't want my crimes to be stopped. Like, that is a totally fine reason for a villain. So it just is, I don't know. We spent a lot of time on this. The point is, quit making people angry at the Jedi because they weren't picked to be Jedi. That's not that compelling.
Right.
We can continue, though. And we get to see Balaba's about to be killed. So Zalastra explains that the whole reason Balaba's on this mission, well, Zalastra doesn't explain that. We know the whole reason Balaba's on this mission is because a Jedi was killed, a Jedi that Balaba was a little close to. And we learn Zalastra is the one who killed him. She strangled him to death, and she's about to strangle Balaba to death. She sedates them before she does it. But Balaba is only saved by random events happening, which is Yaddle is on TV talking about the grand renewal ceremony, and now Zalastra has an idea. And I think that sometimes people being saved not by their own volition and just by random events is a good thing and is good writing, because not every moment has to be some daring last-second escape. Because things like that happen in real life. People get sidetracked. I mean, it just happens. And so it can be the Force. It can be this random event. Whatever. I was happy that was the direction that was taken.
Yeah, yeah. I don't really have anything to add to that. Good little points. Yeah.
So we then see a chapter about a beached whale. And them getting it back into the ocean. Oppo Rancisis helps it get back into the ocean. That was fine. That was all right. It really is just a story about a beached whale. That was a weird chapter again. There's just a couple chapters that are... This book is... We always really laud the fact that there's some really cool slice-of-life stuff in Star Wars. This book may get a little too slice-of-lifey.
Yeah, it's full of it. There's a crazy cat lady.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it gets... the Star Wars universe a little too close to real life. It's like there's snow cone stands, and it's like those things absolutely exist in Star Wars, and not everything needs to be made up whole cloth in Star Wars. There's just a lot of day-to-day moments in this book. So we then have Ethkoth. He's broken away from the chains of this library. He's now seeing the city. He runs into this woman who is a member of one of the gangs. He talks to her. They strike up a conversation. He gives her his phone number and is like, if you ever want to get out of this life, whatever. Second this happened, you can clearly tell. This woman is going to Deus Ex Machina this. She's going to be the reason that something important happens. And so we continue through these stories. We get references to Avar Kriss in the Occlusion Zone. We just get a lot of build-up to this ceremony. And we just continue to build up to the big crescendo that we've learned Zalastra wants to unite the other 5 gangs to do this giant hit and kill all 12 members of the Jedi Council with her same little bomb trick that she had. This is all while, you mentioned earlier, Mace Windu's sitting in this part of the galaxy trying to find Depa Billaba, and he's become more and more, not frantic, because he's a Jedi Master, but he's become more concerned that they're not going to find her. And so they've been in this part of space for a while, and finally Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn get there, and we get this invasion of the pirate fortress. And Mace and Jin and everybody else are helping Billaba escape. Bilaba's about to be killed again, but the bombs that they're dropping on this fortress save her this time. And it all kind of comes to a head where Kyla is captured by Zalastra, and they let Zalastra get away. Mace and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Billaba let Zalastra get away with Kyla because they don't have another option. She's going to kill that little kid.
Right. Yeah, that's a sad little scene there.
There's some more slapsticky violence where the Lobber and the other 2 guys are back, and Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan pushes the thermal detonator out of their hands, and they're like, "That's the armory," and then they have to run away. It was pretty slapsticky, but it was really funny. I was okay with it.
Yeah.
But it was.
I love it when these 3 Stooge analogs show up.
Yeah.
Like I thought they were throwaway characters at the start of this, but when they kept coming back, I'm like, man, this is hilarious.
Yeah, it is. I know. The more often they came back, the better it got. Every time they came back, I was like, all right, these dudes rock. So There's some more slice of life moments. Yoda meets this Celestin who helps them find the arena on the planet. Then he learns that this Celestin guy has been selling drugs to pay for his dad's medical droid. And then the guy dies because he was betrayed by the 5 gangs. And Yoda has said, I'll go see your dad. And it's a really heartwarming scene of Yoda and this dad sitting together. Oh, the guy doesn't die. Sorry. He's taken to a hospital, and he's, like, disabled. Well, anyway.
He almost dies.
Almost dies, yes. And so then his father does die. His father dies of whatever disease he had. And the last sight that he gets to see is the promise of the Jedi, the brazier being lit on the horizon.
Well, one thing I was thinking here is Yoda standing over this guy he just got stabbed. I'm like, man, I have a recollection of somebody who got stabbed and somebody or shot or whatever, and somebody very similar to Yoda was able to wave their hands and heal them, no problem. I'm like, come on, Yoda, you're lacking here. Reach down, use the Force, figure this out. I know he can't do it because there are probably hundreds and hundreds of instances that whatever where he could have and didn't, yada, yada. But I'm like, that's what was going through my head listening to that scene.
Right. No, I understand. I get that. So we continue to go through the story where the Jedi figure out the gang's plan, that they've all aligned together to destroy the Jedi, and that there's a bomb at the arena. There's going to be an invasion of pirate forces. There's just going to be a big battle. And so the Jedi figure it out. Delpa Balaba helps them come up with a plan. And so we know that that there's a bomb underneath the stage. It's voice activated. When they say the Jedi stand with you, it's supposed to blow up and kill everyone in the arena and the Jedi. And I thought it was so funny where they get Yoda to say it, so he says it backwards, and you cut to the pirates, and they're like angry, raging. They're like, This is ridiculous. It's super funny. The Jedi are really,
so funny.
Especially Jedi counselors, are just really good at messing with people, even in dire situations. They're just always clowning on people for some reason. So,
yeah.
That the bomb doesn't go off, the pirates invade, there's this huge fight on Quinn. You get chapter after chapter of different Jedi doing different things because it's such a multifaceted plan. And the reason that it's Zalastra's 12-step plan for killing Jedi is because there are 12 Jedi. And so they have to have enough sections in this plan for each one of the counselors to get to shine and at doing something. And so it's this like really convoluted thing, and every time Zalastra's down, she's not out because she's now figured out we're going to go do this now. Then anyway, it continues through these. We continue to get Veers roasted every chance they get. This guy's just such a screw up in every chapter. And we just continue to go until the whole pirate forces have been defeated. But Zalastra goes and gets the bomb at the outpost. She's going to blow up the outpost, and she does. She destroys the Jedi outpost with a bomb. And it's every time. She does it 3 or 4 times. She's like, well, this is how we can still win. It's just like the Bernie Sanders meme from 2016, where in like 2018, people are still posting, this is how Bernie Sanders can still win. And so this is the same thing. Zalastra is the living embodiment of that meme, this is how the Rift Walkers can still kill the Jedi. And it just doesn't work out. She obviously gets arrested. The outpost does blow up, and the Jedi are going to close it. This was maybe one of my least favorite parts, is that they actually did destroy the outpost. And I get it. I understand why, and it would have been destroyed anyway when the Empire came around. But it just, it means something. It makes me sad for the planet. But that's the point.
Yeah, it does.
That's the point.
What all this stuff, it came to, to me, thoughts in my head. The first part of this book was all these Jedi Masters seemingly doofing around doing silly things. But behind the scenes, they figured out all of Zalastra's plans and foiled them in the most, like a master stroke, hyper efficient, really like 007 James Bond super cool way of figuring out, or I'm sorry, Sherlock Holmes detective style way of figuring these things out, kind of where like, oh yeah, we knew you were up to this all along. Here's how we thwarted it. I'm thinking of the scene like where they're thinking all the guns and the bombs were in the coolers and stuff, and Plo Koon is like, yeah, or maybe it's Kiadi Monday, I don't remember who exactly. They walk in there like, yeah, I'll have an ice cream cone, or I'll have another snow cone, and the guy's like, there is no snow cones, and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, because we got all your guns out of there. I remember that now, and they're like all dejected, and it seems like all the dominoes are falling, and whereas again, as these Jedi Masters seem like they're doofing around, they've really been made all these connections and figured everything out to where it's just so like the gangs opposing them they're the actual doofuses.
Right. And it's every interaction they have is so weird with everybody because they are weird. I mean, it's like they are super hyper unique individuals out in the galaxy, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we see, Zalastra, they're like, why'd you do this? She's like, 'cause a Jedi didn't take me. And then, wham, here comes a bus, and they grab Sifo Dyas, and they launch him underneath it. Nuts. Because they go, oh, yeah, who came and got you? Sifo Dyas. Oh, yeah, that guy? Man, we hate that guy. And they're just like, we made him stop recruiting people. He sucked at it so bad.
Yeah.
And so
what that means is he was trying to find Sith people or what was he doing?
Sifo Dyas was plagued by visions of the Clone War coming, and he thought that basically every action he took was if the Republic was going to crumble or not. He'd have a vision, and he'd be like, I got to get this kid. And then, whatever. Like, Sifo Dyas was pretty bad at interpreting his visions. He had a bunch of visions of the future, but he wasn't great at interpreting them. And that's what Dooku manipulated him a lot of the time on interpreting his visions. And so whatever he was picking these kids up for he was like, they're key to the plan. And then they'd get to the temple, and they're like, these kids have a midichlorian count of 5, man. There's more midichlorians in the tree in the middle of the Jedi temple than in this kid right here. And so that part, he's just not able to bring them good candidates. And that was also crazy. Zalastra's like, you mean they might not even be Jedi? And that, justifiably upset about that part. And the council's right. Sifo Dyas should have done all this bureaucratic mess to help her out, but he didn't do it. And so it was pretty goofy in a good way. It was funny. I really enjoyed that ending to it, and the fact that they just absolutely chucked Sifo Dyas under a bus. So they then have this line at the end: every Jedi is an outpost. Good line. Mega cop out for. I don't remember who they told that to. I think they tell it to Sin Shalvo. And it's like, dude, this guy's life is destroyed. He kept that temple his whole life. And now you're going to be like, every Jedi is an outpost. Like, what?
Yeah, and they're just like, well, we'll find another outpost for you to work at. It's like, man, whatever.
Yeah. And it's good. They realize, and I can't remember who he's speaking to at the end. I think it's Yoda. And no, it's not Yoda. It's definitely not Yoda. Gosh, I can't even venture to remember or guess who it was. But whoever he's speaking to, they kind of, it's Oppo Rancisis. I think it's Oppo Rancisis. And he's like, he gets it at the end. He's like, well, yeah, there's not really anything we can do for this guy. We really did screw this guy over. And it's just true. That's the way of the Force, baby. Anytime you mess up as a Jedi, that's the Force, baby. That's showbiz.
Yeah.
that's what happens, man. And look, Sin Shalvo, he should know that. He's been around Jedi long enough. They're gonna be aloof. They're gonna be like, well, that's how the Force works. Sorry. The last chapter is nuts. It comes out of completely nowhere. It's not ham-fisted. I like it a lot. It's a little weird because it comes completely out of nowhere, and it gives Palpatine that a little bit too much like omnipotence is it for lack of a better term. Like it gives him. I think him being this involved in this story is just like his fingers are in so many pies. But we learn that Sin Shalvo has developed a relationship with Senator Palpatine. He's been selling him some really nice Jedi books. We know that they're all the ones with forbidden knowledge or Sith knowledge or whatever in them. And then Sin Shalvo told Palpatine he was destroying the others, but he was actually selling them to that bookstore. And so Palpatine has seen that Sin Shalvo has outrun his usefulness, and we get Darth Maul there to kill him, which is just out of nowhere again. It's just, you're reading it, and you're like, oh, Palpatine's revealing that he's a Sith. That's weird. Bam, red guy kills him.
Crazy.
It is crazy. It was
good. I'm like, oh, Palpatine's in this, and you knew what was going to happen as soon as, like, I listened to the thing. So Mark Thompson, just as soon as he started talking, and like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this was going to happen, just like you said.
Right.
And then he's like, Seneschal, he's like, what do you mean? Because Palpatine's not talking to him. He's like, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him behind you. And I was like, oh my God. But that's crazy.
It is crazy.
And, like, I would like to think that, I mean, obviously I'm thinking wrong, because let me build on this little point here. If somebody's walking around all black, and even if you caught a glimpse of this guy and he's got his hood up all the time, you caught a glimpse of him, he's got all red, the even all the comic books, the red Twi'leks and stuff, they're like these unique individuals, and they stick out like a red person would. Like a red, and when I say red person, I mean like a color of a red pen or a marker or something.
Right, Darth Maul's color. As red as Darth Maul.
Well, yeah. And then, but this Bad Batch, where all these little infiltrator type people are sneaking around in their ships, landing in caves with nobody on this whole little island even noticing. And so it lends some credence that they have some sort of, and the Sith do, it seems like, they have capabilities to hide in plain sight. So it's very cool that we get to see, out of one little scene, you can inference all that stuff from the whole thing.
You're right. And we know that when the Seneschal is killed, there are still many Jedi counselors on the planet. Yoda is still on the planet. And so, because it says on the epilogue chapter that he's going to go talk to Seneschal Vo. And so it is a huge testament to how clouded the council is, even a year before the Phantom Menace, that they didn't know Darth Maul was on that planet, that his dark side presence did not alert them to that fact.
Yeah.
And so the book ends with the epilogue, and the only really important piece of information we get out of the epilogue is this was all part of Yoda's plan. Like this was what he was going to do. This is what he and Qui-Gon had planned this out from the beginning. It just so happened to work out to do Quinn, but that they had a plan from the beginning to get the Jedi Council on some form of retreat, because Yoda had also thought that they had kind of lost touch with the living force and with the average person.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the book. I'm always happy when there's a new Star Wars novel to come out. This is a time period where I'm always super excited for a Star Wars novel to come out because we get so much information. And so I had a lot of fun reading this one.
Yeah, so I had fun at the end where everything came together. I guess a couple of gripes I might have is this is another book where it was 66 chapters, I think.
Right. Yes.
Or maybe that's including all the little bits, because I listened to it on audiobook, because it starts out, Mark Thompson gives a long time ago and a far, far away. Hey, this is a Star Wars book. Have fun, Right. And it ends with all the copyright info.
Yeah,
but there's 60 some odd chapters.
It's 60 exactly, which is doesn't change your point whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. And so as somebody who, and I'm not an old person, I don't feel old, but as somebody who's read a lot of books over a lot of time, it's just strange to have all this sliced and diced like this.
Yeah, and that's been something that we've noticed. This is a recurring complaint of ours about Star Wars books, is that they're a ton of chapters, like a ton, 60. But the chapters are 4 or 5 pages each. Like when I'm reading this, it's just and I don't 3 or 4 pages every time.
I don't know what the point is in a sense, but for me, I think it does is it compartmentalizes stuff too much, and it makes it feel like I have to put in a lot more effort to accomplish the task of reading the book than it is something with that should have 30 or 40 chapters.
Now that's interesting. I don't feel that way.
That sounds silly.
Yeah, I don't. I think that may be because you're listening to it. I think that part's listening induced because
could be
physically when you look at the book, it's the same thickness as a book with 20 chapters. That's this thick. Like it's the same pages.
Yeah.
But the chapter numbers, you're right, especially on audio, are going to make it feel a lot longer because they're sectioned off and you're seeing every time. When you're sitting down and reading, I mean, I blew through 10 chapters of this book in like 45 minutes. Like it's just
it's super easy to read.
Fast to get through. And so it doesn't feel that way when you're reading it because you're right. You're like, wow, I chewed through 10 chapters, but that 10 chapters is like 30 pages, 45 pages. And so it's not that crazy when you're holding it. And basically because the size is the same, but I totally get where you're coming from when you're listening to it. Right. I can see how that would absolutely be the case.
So another gripe that I'll have, and this is, there's no way around this because the subject matter of this book, but there's just too many characters.
Yeah.
You're hopping around from this character to that character to that character. And until you get to the end, it feels like they're not doing anything meaningful. Ordering a snow cone? Give me a break. Solving all the disputes. If you didn't know anything about the Jedi and pick this book up, you get halfway through and put it down because nothing's happening in this thing.
That's true.
If you understand that these are the Jedi Council members and that they have a mandate to go make a difference in an individual's life, then it has more meaningful impact, right? So this feels like a really hollow gripe because how could you do this any other way? Like I said, I was really overjoyed when it all came together at the very end and they thwarted all these 5 gangs without them even knowing it. It felt really Sherlock Holmesy to me in a sense. But, up until then, I'm like, man, let's get to something going on here.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's obviously it is part of the fact that it's an ensemble and they want to explore every character. And, I would, if this was the only Star Wars book that was busted out into 60 chapters, I would say, oh, it's because it's about 12 people, and so they've got to each get their due, whatever. But you're right that in the middle where before you can see everything come together, there's a lot of chapters that you're just like, man, come on. Like the labor dispute or whatever. You're just like, why? Like, it's not really, you're not asking yourself, why are we doing this? Because everything is going to come together in the end. It has to, because why would they spend time talking about it if it wasn't? But even when you're reading it, you're just like, I don't care about this. I don't want to know about this. Give me the gist. Like, I got it. Okay, they made this friend with this tent company. Awesome, got it. But there's still a lot of really good stuff about this book. There's a lot of great characters. There's a lot of good character study here. And I was just super impressed. The thing I'm most impressed about it is how he was able to make all really 14 Jedi in this book distinct from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and stuff that, like, I've never had or read anything outside of the vague memories of Yar Yar Poof and that stupid parody thing. But Oppo Rancisis, getting to actually live with these characters for just a moment, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's a great book. I definitely encourage any Star Wars fan, go out and pick this up. We enjoyed it quite a bit, and we're looking forward to the next book that we're going to review on here. But that wraps up the meat of our podcast. We got a lot more podcast for you, though, because we're going to head right now into our How the Force Works segment. Colin, we have for our How the Force Works question, a question that I have no doubt must have been inspired from the Star Wars Outlaws video game, because this question is just too topical for it to have not been. And so we're going to talk about Loaf's question today. Loaf's question:
That's not how the Force works.
Trilogy. How good of a handle does the Empire have on crime?
So, gosh, this one is super complicated, and my answer is going to be dumb in a sense of hardly at all, but also really good at the same time. And this all, to me, goes back to what does the Empire care about? And that is primarily resources. They want to build Death Stars and giant capital ships in order to exert their will across the whole galaxy. You know, that's the whole Tarkin doctrine thing. And so if you live on a resource-rich planet where the slightest infraction can land you in jail where you're making Death Star parts constantly, then crime stepping out, going over the dotted line on the street is going to land you in jail, right? But if you're at the same time a spice runner who is making some moth billions of credits on the side, and you know, for all these like fees and taxes and who knows what, then obviously that's going to be looked over. And you know, when the Sith Lord wants his own cadre of hired guns to go just waylay whoever he wants, he needs to pluck those out of the hat and do what he wants. And same with any other Imperial who has a modicum of power. So, I mean, like, you can just as easily say that crime is a tool in a tool belt for the Empire. And that's I'll end it on that.
Yeah, I think that the answer has to come with a question, and that's when are you talking about? Not just in the original trilogy, because or just in the original trilogy, you have to understand when you're talking about, because every society, regardless of if they're good or bad, empire or not, has a golden age for that society. It has a peak, an apex, where they were doing their best for what their goal was. And so if you look at the Empire, I don't know, we'll just throw out a number, 8 years after Order 66, it's probably really, really great on crime. The rebellion is exceptionally fledgling, so they can basically only focus on crime. And so it's kind of locked down. But as the rebellion continues to grow and as insurgency starts to become a bigger and bigger problem for the Empire, they have to divert more and more resources to dealing with the rebels and the insurgents. And, you know, insurgency is a crime, but that's not what you're talking about. That's not the point of the question. And so you can say, oh, there's a bunch of rebels in jail, or, oh, yeah, they're dealing with a bunch of crime because they're putting down a bunch of insurgents. Well, that's sure, I guess, in a theoretical sense, but that's not what someone's asking. Someone's asking is, how do they handle murderers and drug dealers and prostitution and yada, yada, yada. And so the Empire at A New Hope is dealing with the rebel insurgency a lot. It is not at its peak for the rebellion. But this is the Empire at its peak of power, but most of its power is being diverted to dealing with the insurgency. So we see on Tatooine, Mos Eisley, and we see no more a wretched hive of scum and villainy, that this place is lawless. It's within the Imperial borders, but it's a little bit better administered than it was when the Republic was there, but it's still not being administered properly because the Empire has had to divert so much resource to fighting the rebellion. And from A New Hope on, that only gets worse, to the point where we see Star Wars Outlaws, when it takes place between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and that character says they're dealing with the rebels the whole time. We can run wild, and the rebels are a bigger problem after Empire than they were after A New Hope. They are causing more of a ruckus, and the organization has grown larger. And so the Empire has had to divert more resources. They had the Death Star already blown up. They're now building a second one. And so there's just too much going on in the Empire for them to be able to see and do everything. And so the handle that the Empire has on crime during the original trilogy, probably never good. It's never a lot. And to your point earlier, the Empire has an exceptionally high incarceration rate, but how many people in jail are Cassian Andor, who didn't really do anything? And how many people in jail are spice runners and smugglers and actual criminals? Not very many of them. Jabba the Hutt, Tatooine is not in Hutt space. It is not part of that section of the galaxy. Tatooine is in Imperial territory. Jabba the Hutt is a famous gangster where everybody knows where he lives, and nothing ever happened to him. Not when the Republic was there, not when the Empire was there. And so that can, there's all kinds of, well, we don't want to start a war with the Hutts, yada, yada. And maybe if the rebellion never existed, that was probably logically the Empire's next step. Round up the rest of the galaxy, then invade Hutt space. But when we see criminals like Jabba just running rampant during this time period, it cannot be said that the Empire has a good handle on crime. They're just focused on insurgency instead of crime.
Right. No, that's exactly right.
But that was a really good question. We really appreciate that question, Loaf. We love answering these questions. So if you are a listener of the podcast and you want to ask us a question, all you've got to do is head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station. And the Jedi Knight tier or above lets you do How the Force Works. And we would love to answer any of your questions that we can. Our next segment for today is the HoloNet news segment, and we've got plenty of news to talk to you about, and so we're going to hop into this one right now. All right, Colin, so our first news story for today is these guys, if you're a fan of these guys, you just keep winning. I mean, it's like you can't win for losing. No matter what, these characters get new stories. It is really crazy. There is set to...
You made the HoloNet.
It's going to follow the Inquisitorius. It's going to follow the Grand Inquisitor. The fifth brother is on the cover. And so, presumably, it's going to be about the whole Inquisitorius. And I just feel like we have gotten a ton of Inquisitor content ever since they were invented. It hasn't ever slowed down, really. And I'm not complaining, but I am saying we got a bunch of Inquisitor stuff all the time.
And we're fixing to get more with this Tales of the Empire. Right?
Yes, yeah, we are.
Cartoon. So, yeah, I'm pumped for this. I really like all the characters. This is going to sound silly, but the Inquisitor was a fun ship on the X-Wing tabletop game. And so, for some reason, that silly board game endears me to his character.
That's funny. See, I really love...
And so getting to see more is always a good thing.
I really love the Grand Inquisitor. I've liked him for a while, and I think that I really like stories about him. The rest of the Inquisitors, I mean, there's some that I like more than others, but the whole organization, when they first came out, were so mysterious, and we didn't know a whole lot about them. I feel like we are intimately familiar with Inquisitors now. I mean, Rebels and Kenobi and Rise of the Red Blade and the Fallen Order and Survivor and everything else. I mean, it's just always Inquisitor, Inquisitor, Inquisitor. Not a bad thing, but just definitely an observation.
Right.
So our next news story was something that, I mean, I did a double take when I saw this. I was very, very surprised. Tony Gilroy was presented with a Career Achievement Award by the Writers Guild of America. And in his remarks, he was talking about Andor, obviously. I mean, this is what he's working on right now. This is where he's focusing all of his time, is on Andor Season 2, that we're hoping to have come out sometime next year. And he says that he doesn't think he's ever done anything as important as the 24 hours of storytelling that they're telling with Andor. With the Andor's second season, Tony Gilroy says is the most important thing he has done in his career, which just floored me. Tony Gilroy isn't even really a Star Wars fan. He's said that before. He's seen them, but he's not like a Star Wars guy. And this is the guy who did all of the Bourne movies and Rogue One. And so, I mean, this really pumps me up for Andor, man. It makes me even more excited than I already was, and I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, I mean, Andor is the sleeper hit of almost anything Star Wars outside the original trilogy, right? Goodness gracious. This makes me so pumped to see this. I can't wait.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be really, really good. And I'm happy to hear Tony Gilroy say something like that, especially just like I had said, he's not much of a Star Wars fan. He's said that before. But to be able to make such high-quality Star Wars and then call it one of the most important things you've ever done, really, really interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, super.
So, our last news story. This one also had my eyes kind of pop out of my head because I thought it was really interesting. It is being reported that the staff on the Acolyte, that the Acolyte team has said they are aiming to beat the Phantom Menace's lightsaber duels. Now, when they say lightsaber duels, they really just mean the Duel of the Fates. I mean, that's the one to beat, right? That is of that and the Battle of the Heroes and Revenge of the Sith. Those are the two lightsaber fights that are just widely considered to be the best ones. And they say that they're going to top it in the Acolyte, or that they want to top it.
Yeah, that's kind of a tall order, don't you think? I mean, didn't we have a rating or our top 10 list or top 5 list, something like that, of our favorite lightsaber fights? And yours was this Phantom Menace one?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, gosh, could you imagine what kind of accomplishment that would be in a TV show like this?
I mean, look, I'm rooting for it.
That's
I want
deal.
it to happen, but this is... The prequels had a lot of magic around their lightsaber fights for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was the choreographer, Nick Gillard, is just such an accomplished swordsman. I mean, that guy knows swordcraft in and out. He knows exactly how to do it. He was the foundation of all of that choreography in the prequels. And, he's not involved with Lucasfilm anymore, and... That's not. I don't know anything about the reason that he's not involved. I mean, that was 20 years ago. So there's not to say there's any kind of bad blood, but we haven't heard anything about him being involved in the Acolyte. And this isn't to say that if Nick Gillard's not in it, it can't be good. That's not true. There are other great swordsmen out there, but Nick Gillard, what he brought to the choreography of the prequel movies was something really special and really impressive. And I just do think, like you said, it's a tall order to try and replicate that. It's just it's a lot to ask to try and replicate that, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right.
We'll see, and I'm rooting for it. I'd love to have an amazing, and I know we're going to have a ton of lightsabers. They've already said there's going to be a bunch in the show, more than in any other content, which hard to beat Attack of the Clones there. That's good. That's still got to be like 100 lightsabers. But it's going to be really exciting. I am super pumped for the Acolyte, and we're close now, a month and a half. We're less than a month and a half now.
Yeah. It's going to show up. It's going to feel like nothing.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. So, Colin, that wraps up the HoloNet news segment, and now we've got one more segment left. And so let's roll right into our Star Wars moment of the week. All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
Mine is something I'm super excited for. I texted you this the moment I found out. And because I fell out of my chair, I was so excited. But also coming out May 4th.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Really reasonable price is the Lego UCS set for the TIE Interceptor. Gosh, go back to our podcast and listen to what I said about the TIE Interceptor shown in The Mandalorian Season 3. We thought it was going to be kind of a really big deal. We thought the trailers had a lot of hints towards it. Didn't end up materializing. But regardless, on the tabletop game, like I mentioned moments ago, in so many different aspects, that TIE Interceptor is probably my favorite ship. In our RPG, that was the ship my character first flew until I was able to get a hold of a different one. So I'm super pumped for this Lego set. I want to get it as soon as I'm able and post some pictures to Instagram so y'all can check it out.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see you get that. Excited to see those pictures because it looks great. We're both big Lego fans, and that's going to be a really cool set. That's also my favorite Imperial ship. I mean, it's just the Interceptor is the perfect variation of the TIE Fighter. Like the TIE Fighter is already insanely iconic, and the Interceptor is just like the logical leap that makes a ton of sense in universe, and it looks good doing it. And so it's all of the right.
Exactly
it's all
right.
of the right parts. So my Star Wars moment of the week is for Christmas. My father-in-law got me a couple collectible coins. They're British pounds that were printed with Star Wars characters on them. And so one is a Darth Vader coin and one is a Grogu coin. Well, anyway, he got them for me for Christmas, but then he lost them in between giving them to me and me getting them and Christmas. And so he lives in a small dwelling, and so he was like, I know they're here somewhere, but I don't know where. So when I find them, I'll bring them to you. And I'd forgotten about them, but I got to see him just a couple weeks ago, and he brought them, and they are super cool. And I was very happy to receive them. And now they're sitting on my Star Wars bookshelf.
And they're made of silver, is that right?
Yeah.
Man, those are going for a pretty penny nowadays.
Yeah, they're
That's
really cool. They're super neat. They are super neat. So I was very happy about it. I thought it was neat.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But that wraps up our podcast episode this week. Guys, we had a ton of fun on this episode. We really appreciate your listenership. We appreciate your continued engagement with the podcast. And we're having a lot of fun. There's only 2 episodes of Bad Batch left. And so we are going to have our next 2 episodes be that. And then it's all Acolyte ramp up from there. It's going to be a ton of fun learning about the Acolyte, getting ready for that show, and there's just a lot of good Star Wars happening this year.
There really is. So much is on the horizon. So much looking forward to it. I mean, we're just rolling right through all this stuff, and lots of other stuff going on too.
Absolutely. We hope you guys won't forget about this weekend at 1:15 Central Time. We are going to be having a live podcast broadcast from our local comic convention. We would love for you guys to tune in on either Twitch or YouTube and check us out. We're going to be answering questions live on the show. If you have a question that you want to get asked and you're not able to make it out there, then please email us a question, send us a question on Instagram DMs. We'll answer them there. We love doing these live shows, and it's been a really long time since we've done one, and so we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so pumped about that. It's going to be a really good deal. I hope you can come to us and see us in person for that. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all kinds of stuff going on here at Star Wars Station and at Station Media. You know, if you're a Warhammer fan, you can check out all of our Warhammer content, warhammer.station on Instagram. We're doing a tournament also this weekend. It's a busy weekend here at Station Media. It's a very busy weekend.
Yeah, it really is.
Completely unrelated.
Been a busy week for me.
Colin and I are playing in a golf tournament with each other tomorrow, so it's busy weekend. But really, guys, we appreciate your support. We appreciate all of your continued support. If you want to support the podcast more, you can head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station, where we have tiers starting at $1. We've got stickers, we've got t-shirts, we've got extra podcasts, we've got an RPG podcast. There should be a couple brand new episodes dropping really soon for that. And so if you haven't heard it, we've got 2 sample episodes here on the podcast feed. So please go check those out. And if you're interested, you can get that podcast for only $2. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a live play Star Wars RPG. I promise you won't regret it. But there's a lot of other ways to support us too. You can go to Apple. You can give us 5 stars there. You can go to Spotify and give us 5 stars there. Leave a review. Leave a like on YouTube, a subscription on YouTube. Leave a comment on YouTube videos. All of this stuff helps us with the algorithm. All of it helps us to grow. All of it helps us to continue to bring you all of this Star Wars content that we get to bring you over and over and over again. We're available on Instagram at starwars.station. We're available on Twitter at SW_station. Twitch, twitch.tv/station media. Guys, there's all kinds of ways that you can connect with us, and we hope that you are connecting with us.
Yeah, lots of fun out there. StarWarsStationPodcast.com. Did you mention that already?
No.
Yeah, fun website out there. Buy stickers, buy a shirt. Check out our backlog. Find links to interact with us.
Absolutely. And guys, again, continue to listen to us, continue to support us. We appreciate your support so much, and we also appreciate you doing that one thing every week, and the one thing is, stay wizard. Nope.
Already? Yeah, fun website out there. Buy stickers, buy a shirt. Check out our backlog. Find links to interact with us.
Absolutely. And guys, again, continue to listen to us, continue to support us. We appreciate your support so much, and we also appreciate you doing that one thing every week, and the one thing is, stay wizard.